There comes a moment when searching turns into listening, when effort softens into attention. If you are here now, it is not because you were looking for another explanation, but because something within you sensed that the answer you need is simpler and closer than you were taught to believe. Many try to manifest by force, by repetition, by urgency. They strain the mind and exhaust the heart, wondering why nothing moves. The secret has never been about doing more. It has always been about understanding when and how life responds. Most people believe manifestation begins with desire. In truth, it begins with consent. What you allow inwardly determines what can arrive outwardly. And until that agreement is made, no technique, no matter how clever, can bring lasting change. There is a reason some people seem to manifest effortlessly while others struggle for years. It is not luck. It is not privilege. It is alignment. Life answers certainty far faster than effort, and clarity far faster than longing. You may have noticed that the things you chase often resist you, while the things you expect quietly seem to find you. This is not coincidence. Expectation is instruction. Life follows the inner command long before the outer action begins. The mind wants steps, formulas, timelines. It wants control. But manifestation operates by law, not by pressure. When the law is understood, outcomes become inevitable rather than uncertain. There is a subtle shift that changes everything the moment you stop trying to make something happen and start allowing it to happen through you. That shift is rarely taught, yet it is the hinge upon which every result turns. Many have been taught to visualize outcomes while secretly rehearsing doubt. They speak words of faith while expecting disappointment. Life does not respond to performance, it responds to belief. And belief is revealed by what you calmly assume, not what you desperately repeat. The secret is not hidden because it is complicated. It is hidden because it is simple. Simplicity unsettles the mind that believes struggle is necessary. Yet what moves quickly in life always moves simply. When manifestation fails, it is not because something is missing. It is because something is being contradicted. Inner resistance delays outer response every time. Remove resistance, and the path clears without effort. You do not need to convince life of what you want. Life already knows. What must change is your agreement with the possibility of receiving it naturally, without strain, without proving, without delay. There is a precise moment when manifestation becomes automatic. It is the moment you stop checking if it is working and start trusting that it already is. Monitoring slows everything down. If you have ever noticed that things fall into place the moment you stop worrying about them, you have already touched the secret. Worry is effort in disguise. Trust is alignment made visible. The unseen always moves first. Results lag behind agreement. This is why impatience interrupts manifestation. It assumes nothing is happening when, in truth, everything is reorganizing. You do not manifest what you want. You manifest what you are aligned with. Desire alone is powerless without alignment. Alignment is calm. It does not rush. It does not argue. It simply expects. The mind often resists this truth because it removes struggle from the equation. Yet, struggle has never been the requirement for creation. Order responds to understanding, not exhaustion. When you understand how life responds, timing no longer frightens you. Delay no longer discourages you. You recognize that movement is happening even when nothing appears to change. There is a way to speak, think, and expect that removes interference entirely. When interference dissolves, manifestation becomes predictable rather than mysterious. You may have been told that manifestation requires constant focus. In truth, it requires correct focus. The difference changes everything. One creates tension, the other creates flow. This is not about ignoring reality. It is about choosing which reality you give authority to. The visible follows the invisible every time. When you govern the invisible correctly, the visible must comply. What follows is not theory. It is not motivation. It is understanding. And understanding replaces effort with certainty, and certainty with results. Once you see this, you will stop chasing methods and start observing responses. You will notice how quickly life rearranges itself when resistance is removed. Do not rush ahead. Secrets reveal themselves in sequence. When you grasp the foundation, everything else becomes obvious, almost embarrassingly so. If you have ever wondered why manifestation sometimes works and sometimes fails, you are about to see why. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Stay here. What you are about to understand does not require belief, it creates it. I have often said that life is not a battle, but a game. And yet I find that most people play it as though they were wrestling an invisible enemy. They strain, they plan, they repeat words with intensity, and they wonder why nothing moves. They have been taught that effort creates results, when in truth, effort often delays them. The law of life is exact, but it is not harsh. It does not respond to force. It responds to understanding. And until this is clearly seen, man will continue to labor where he was meant to rest. Many people believe that manifestation begins with desire. They say, if I want something strongly enough, if I think of it often enough, if I speak of it fervently enough, it must come. But desire alone is not a creative power. Desire without faith is merely longing. And longing often carries within it the poison of doubt. The soul that longs is usually the soul that fears it may never receive. And fear is inverted faith. It is faith in loss instead of faith in fulfillment. Life does not answer longing. It answers expectancy. Expectancy is a quiet thing. It is not nervous. It does not watch the clock. It does not explain itself to others. Expectancy is the calm assumption that a thing belongs to one by divine right and therefore must come at the appointed hour. When expectancy is established, the law is set in motion, and the channels begin to open, often in ways so natural that man later says, "It came about quite simply," not knowing that simplicity is always the mark of divine action. I have noticed that people who fail repeatedly often fail in the same way. They speak words of faith while secretly agreeing with fear. They say, "I know God is my supply," and then hurry to say, "But times are very hard." They say, "I trust infinite intelligence," and then add, "But I must be practical." In that moment, the latter words neutralize the former. The subconscious mind, which is power without direction, accepts the last clear instruction given to it. It does not weigh intentions. It obeys impressions. There is no power in repeating words which contradict one's inner agreement. The law cannot be fooled. Life responds to what man inwardly consents to, not to what he outwardly performs. Many people perform faith while rehearsing doubt. They imagine success while secretly expecting disappointment. They say affirmations while watching anxiously to see if they are working. And the watching itself is a confession of unbelief. One does not watch for the sunrise with anxiety. One expects it. I knew a woman who came to me asking why her affairs never seemed to move forward. She had studied truth for years. She knew the affirmations. She spoke them diligently. Yet she was always on the verge of discouragement. When I questioned her closely, I found that each morning she affirmed prosperity, and each evening she counted what she had not received. She was like a person who plants a seed and digs it up daily to see if it has sprouted. The law cannot work under inspection. Faith is the ability to leave a thing alone. When she learned to make her statements once or twice with conviction, and then refused to discuss the matter further even with herself, her affairs began to change rapidly. She later said, "I see now that I was trying to persuade God instead of agreeing with Him." That is always the turning point. God does not need persuasion. He needs permission, and permission is given through inner agreement. Manifestation, then, begins with consent. Consent to the idea that good is natural. Consent to the idea that supply is orderly. Consent to the idea that what belongs to one by divine right cannot be withheld. Until that consent is made, man is divided against himself, and a divided house cannot stand. The Bible tells us that a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. He sends out 2 commands and wonders why nothing obeys. It is not necessary to struggle into belief. Belief is not forced. Belief comes when truth is recognized. When a man sees clearly that gravity does not need his effort to function, he stops straining to make things fall downward. In the same way, when a man understands spiritual law, he stops straining to make life respond. He aligns himself with the law, and the law does the work. I have seen people exhaust themselves with mental effort. They sit for hours visualizing, repeating, affirming, only to rise from their chair more anxious than when they sat down. They mistake intensity for faith, but faith is not intense. Faith is restful. Faith is the quiet knowing that the burden is no longer one's own. Cast thy burden upon the Lord, we are told, not carry it more cleverly. When man has truly cast the burden, there is a distinct feeling of relief. The body relaxes, the mind quiets, the need to explain disappears. This is how one knows the law has been set in motion. Until that moment comes, words are only words. But when the inner consent is given, even a simple statement becomes powerful. One may say quietly, "I am under grace," and feel the weight lift. That feeling is the signal to the subconscious. It says, "The order has been received." People often ask, "How shall I know when I have truly believed?" The answer is simple. When fear ceases, when urgency dissolves, when you no longer feel compelled to discuss the matter, when you stop watching for signs, when you are able to say, "It is done," and turn your attention to something else with peace. That is belief, and belief always precedes manifestation. Others will notice this change before the outer result appears. They will say, "You seem calmer." They will trust your judgment more readily. They will stop offering advice. There is something in poise which commands respect. A person who is inwardly aligned does not plead. He does not argue. He does not justify. He stands quietly, and life rearranges itself around him. I once knew a man who was seeking advancement in his work. For years he spoke of being overlooked. He repeated the story so often that his failure became a habit of speech. When he learned to cease speaking of injustice and began affirming quietly, "There is a place prepared for me which no man can take," his manner changed. He no longer complained. He no longer watched others. Within a short time, an opportunity came to him through an entirely different channel, and those who had once overlooked him now sought his counsel. Nothing outside had changed until something within had changed. Expectation is instruction. Whatever man expects, he invites. If he expects delay, delay comes. If he expects disappointment, disappointment follows. If he expects good, good hastens toward him. It is not coincidence. It is law. According to your faith be it unto you does not mean according to your wishing, but according to your calm assumption. There is a vast difference between hoping and expecting. Hope looks forward anxiously. Expectation rests. Hope says, Perhaps. Expectation says, of course. Life always responds to the latter. One who expects good does not rush it. He knows that divine timing is exact. He understands that what is unseen is already in motion. Therefore, impatience no longer tempts him. Impatience is the confession that one believes nothing is happening, but the unseen always moves first. The seed germinates in darkness. The child is formed before it is seen. The plan is completed in divine mind before it appears in the world of form. To doubt during this interval is to interfere with the process. That is why Jesus said, "Judge not by appearances." The moment a man understands this, manifestation becomes predictable rather than mysterious. He no longer wonders why things sometimes work and sometimes fail. He sees that whenever he is calm and expectant, life responds swiftly. Whenever he is anxious and divided, delay follows. The law is consistent. Man has merely been inconsistent in his agreement with it. I often give this simple statement to those who are troubled. I am under grace and not under strain. When repeated with understanding, it dissolves urgency and restores order. Another is, my good comes to me by divine law, and I rest in expectancy. These are not words to be shouted or forced. They are to be spoken quietly until the soul agrees. Repetition is essential, not because God needs reminding, but because the subconscious must be impressed. The subconscious learns through repetition and feeling. One does not strike a single note and expect a melody. One practices until harmony is established. In the same way, man must practice right agreement until it becomes his natural state. When this foundation is laid, all other instructions become simple. Without it, no method can succeed. With it, even a few words spoken at the right moment can open doors that effort never could. The secret has never been about doing more. It has always been about agreeing more deeply with the truth that God is orderly, good is natural, and supply is inevitable. Once this is seen, the game changes. Man stops trying to make life respond and begins to observe how faithfully it already does. He ceases to chase outcomes and begins to govern causes. He understands that certainty accelerates while effort delays. And from that moment, the path grows steadily clearer beneath his feet. Having seen that manifestation rests upon inner agreement, it becomes necessary to understand the instrument through which that agreement is made active. That instrument is the spoken word. Man is forever speaking aloud or silently, and every word is a command. He is either giving orders to the law intelligently or ignorantly, but he is always giving them. There is no moment of neutrality. Even silence, when charged with fear, is speech to the subconscious. I have often said that death and life are in the power of the tongue, and yet people repeat these words without pausing to consider their meaning. They imagine that only dramatic declarations carry power, while their casual remarks pass unnoticed. But the subconscious mind is always listening. It records tone, feeling, and expectation. It does not discriminate between a prayer and a complaint. Whatever is spoken with feeling is impressed upon it and carried out in minutest detail. Many people come to me asking why their affairs seem fixed, why the same difficulties return again and again. When we examine their conversation, the reason is usually apparent. They are loyal to their troubles. They repeat their story daily. They tell it to friends, to family, and most faithfully of all, to themselves. In doing so, they are renewing the command. They are telling the law, continue. I once knew a woman who said repeatedly, I always miss my opportunities. She said it lightly, almost humorously, but she said it often. And so she did. Opportunities came and went, and she was always just a moment too late. When she learned to reverse her speech and say quietly, "That which is mine by divine right comes to me at the right time," the pattern changed. Nothing else changed at first, only the words. But the words changed the direction of power. The subconscious mind has no sense of humor. It takes man at his word. When he jokes about misfortune, it accepts the picture as real. I have known people who joked themselves into illness, poverty, and loneliness. They would later say, "I never meant it." But the law does not respond to meaning. It responds to impression. Feeling is the imprinting agent, and repetition deepens the groove. People often say to me, "I do not speak negatively, but I think these things." Thought is also speech. Silent speech is often more powerful than spoken words because it is less checked and more habitual. The inner dialogue runs continuously, and whatever is rehearsed there becomes familiar. Familiarity breeds expectation, and expectation becomes destiny. It is therefore of the utmost importance to become a watchman at the gate of one's thoughts and words. This does not mean repression or strain. It means alertness. It means refusing to speak that which one does not wish to experience. It means withdrawing attention from appearances and giving it to principles. When a man understands this, he ceases to discuss his affairs loosely. He becomes economical with speech, knowing that words are seeds. I knew a man who was constantly speaking of hard times. He read about them, discussed them, and expected them. When he learned to say, "I live under a law of abundance, and I am unaffected by fear," his conversation changed. He no longer argued with people about conditions. He spoke of opportunity instead of lack. Within a short time, business improved, though nothing had changed in the market. The change was in his word. Words are vibratory forces. They move unseen currents. When a man speaks of failure, he aligns himself with failure. When he speaks of success, he aligns himself with success. Alignment is everything. The law cannot give man what he denies with his own mouth. Jesus said, "By thy words thou shalt be justified, and by thy words thou shalt be condemned." There is no partiality in this law. It works for all alike. Many people say affirmations as though they were trying to convince a stubborn listener. They repeat them anxiously, hoping to overpower doubt. This is not the way of power. Words spoken in fear are neutralized by the fear which accompanies them. A single statement spoken with realization is more potent than 1,000 spoken in desperation. When I give affirmations, I urge people to choose words which bring relief. Relief is the sign that the statement is true for them. If a phrase increases tension, it should be changed. Truth brings peace. One may say, "I have a wonderful work, in a wonderful way. I give wonderful service, for wonderful pay," and feel a lifting of the heart. That lifting is the subconscious saying, "I accept." The law of the spoken word is closely bound to the law of return. Whatever man sends out comes back to him, multiplied. If he sends out criticism, he will be criticized. If he sends out praise, he will be praised. If he sends out blessings, blessings return. This is not morality, it is mechanics. One cannot sow thistles and reap figs. Yet people are surprised when their own words return to them through the mouths of others. I recall a woman who was habitually critical. She criticized her family, her friends, and strangers. She came to me complaining that everyone treated her harshly. When I pointed out the correspondence, she was astonished. She had never connected her own speech with her experience. When she learned to bless instead of criticize, the change was immediate. She said, "It is as though I had changed the air around me." She had changed her vibration. What man says of another, he is saying of himself. What he wishes for another, he is wishing for himself. This is why resentment is so destructive. To resent another is to poison one's own well. Forgiveness is not for the other person's benefit. It is for one's own release. When resentment is dropped, power returns. There is great protection in goodwill. One who sends out goodwill cannot be harmed. He is surrounded by an invisible armor. No weapon formed against him shall prosper. This is not a promise of exemption from challenge, but a promise of immunity from defeat. The law responds to love as surely as it responds to fear. Speech also governs the body. The body is the servant of the mind, and it responds to words faithfully. I have seen conditions healed when the underlying words were changed. People speak illness into being by constant reference to it. They name it, describe it, and expect it. When they learn to speak health instead, the body obeys. The subconscious does not argue with medical terms. It responds to conviction. I once knew a woman who was told she would always be delicate. She accepted the label and repeated it for years. When she learned to say, I am strong, whole, and perfectly sustained, and to refuse the old description, her health improved steadily. The body simply followed new orders. One must be particularly careful of words spoken in moments of emotion. Anger, fear, and discouragement give words unusual force. Many a person has spoken disaster into his affairs in a single moment of despair. The law does not punish these moments, but it records them. Fortunately, the law of forgiveness allows man to neutralize mistakes. A destructive word can be undone by a word of truth, spoken with equal feeling. I often give this statement when someone realizes he has spoken wrongly. I now neutralize every destructive word I have spoken, and I set in motion the law of good. This is not wishful thinking. It is a command to the subconscious to erase the old record and accept a new one. The subconscious is faithful. It does not cling to error when corrected. As man disciplines his speech, others notice the change. They feel safer in his presence. They trust him. They come to him for counsel. Words shape character as well as conditions. A person who speaks wisely becomes wise. A person who speaks fearlessly becomes fearless. The tongue trains the soul. It is not necessary to speak constantly of one's desires. In fact, silence is often the final proof of faith. When a man has spoken the word and feels the inner assent, he need not repeat it endlessly. He goes about his affairs quietly, knowing that the law is at work. He is not tempted to argue or defend. He lets results speak. I have observed that those who talk most about their plans often accomplish least. They scatter their forces. Silence gathers power. There is a time to speak and a time to be still. The wise man knows the difference. He speaks the word once, clearly, and then guards it with silence. When man understands the power of the word, he becomes reverent in his use of language. He no longer says, I cannot, or I always fail, or that never works. He knows he is making laws for himself with such phrases. Instead, he chooses words which open rather than close. He speaks of possibility, order, and right outcome. One of the simplest and most powerful statements is, there is no loss in divine mind. When repeated, it dissolves fear of loss in every form. Another is, that which belongs to me by divine right cannot be taken from me. These are not affirmations of greed, but acknowledgments of order. Divine mind knows no deprivation. Repetition is the key to impressing the subconscious. Just as a habit is formed by repeated action, so a belief is formed by repeated speech. The law does not ask for strain, only for persistence. A few moments each day spent in right speech will accomplish more than hours of anxious effort. As this understanding deepens, man finds that his words carry weight. He speaks less, but what he says happens. He no longer argues with appearances. He states truth and lets the law fulfill it. In this way, the spoken word becomes a scepter, and man begins to rule his affairs instead of being ruled by them. When speech is aligned with faith, and faith with expectancy, the way is prepared for the next great principle, the discovery of one's divine design and perfect self-expression. For when man speaks rightly, he begins to hear rightly, and the path opens before him naturally. When man has learned to govern his words, he is prepared to understand a deeper law, the law of divine design. For life is not a scramble in which all compete for the same prize. It is an orderly plan, and each soul has a place already prepared. Confusion, competition, and struggle arise only when man tries to force himself into a place that is not his own or imitate the path of another. There is no peace in borrowed destiny. Every man and woman has a work to do which no one else can do in the same way. This is what I mean by perfect self-expression. It is not a question of position or title, but of alignment. When one is in one's right place, there is no strain, no envy, and no sense of rivalry. Supply flows naturally, for supply always follows service when service is true. Many people suffer because they are striving for something which is not part of their divine design. They admire the success of another and decide they must have the same form of expression. But what is success for one may be bondage for another. The soul knows its own path, but it is often drowned out by ambition, comparison, and fear. When man silences these voices, he begins to hear the still, small voice which says, "This is the way, walk ye in it." I knew a woman who envied her friend's prosperity. The friend had received a beautiful gift and much recognition, and the woman felt overlooked. This feeling of envy shut off her own good completely. When she learned to say, with sincerity, "What God has done for others, He now does for me and more," the sense of lack vanished. Shortly afterward, she received an exact duplicate of the gift plus another blessing. Envy dissolved, and supply rushed in. There is no competition in divine mind. Resentment and envy are forms of ignorance. They assume that good is limited, but good is infinite, and each man draws from it according to his receptivity. When one begrudges another's success, he is saying. When he blesses another's success, he affirms abundance, and the door opens. Divine design does not operate through force. It unfolds through obedience. When a man insists on his own way, he often finds that doors close, strength fails, and confusion increases. When he yields personal will and says, "I desire only that which is mine by divine right," a remarkable reordering takes place. Situations rearrange themselves. Old plans fall away. New opportunities appear, often unexpectedly. Perfect self-expression brings with it a sense of authority. One who is in his right place does not need to assert himself. Others recognize him. They feel his fitness. They trust his judgment. He no longer needs to explain his value. Life explains it for him. This is why so many people struggle for recognition. They are trying to be seen in the wrong role. I recall a man who had great ability but no success. He worked tirelessly, yet advancement eluded him. When we spoke, I found that he disliked his work but felt bound to it by fear. He believed he must endure what he hated in order to survive. This belief alone kept him in bondage. When he learned to say, "I have a wonderful work in a wonderful way. I give wonderful service for wonderful pay," and to mean it, a change occurred. He was led to a different line of work, one he enjoyed. Right work does not exhaust, it invigorates. When one is in divine design, energy increases rather than diminishes. Fatigue often signals misalignment. The soul protests when it is forced into false channels. When man listens to that protest instead of silencing it with fear, he is guided into freedom. Many people cling to associations which have long ceased to be harmonious, out of habit or fear. But no relationship which is truly ordained by divine mind can be lost. Only false ties fall away. There is no loss in divine mind, and therefore, no loss in right letting go. I have known women who feared to release unsatisfying conditions, saying, "Suppose nothing better comes?" This fear assumes that good is accidental, but good is designed. When one lets go of what is not right, he makes room for what is. Holding on to the wrong thing blocks the arrival of the right one. When man is aligned with divine design, others see him differently. He seems more assured, more at ease. His decisions carry weight. People listen when he speaks. This is not arrogance. It is alignment. Authority comes from order. Disorder breeds uncertainty. It is important to understand that divine design often reveals itself gradually. One step leads to another. The soul is not usually shown the entire path at once. This requires trust. Those who demand to see the whole plan before moving remain stationary. Those who obey the next step are led onward. Many people try to plan their lives intellectually, mapping every detail. They say, "If this happens, then that must follow." But divine mind does not operate by man's limited reasoning. It creates its own channels. When one releases rigid planning and affirms, "I am in my right place, at the right time, doing the right thing," surprising doors open. I once knew a woman who wanted a certain position. She prepared herself thoroughly, yet was passed over repeatedly. She was discouraged and resentful. When she ceased striving for that particular outcome and began to affirm alignment instead of position, an entirely different opportunity came to her, one far better suited to her gifts. She later said, "I see now that what I wanted was not what I needed." Divine design never deprives, it fulfills. But it often requires that man relinquish his own limited ideas of success. When he does, he is rewarded beyond expectation. The Bible tells us that God's ways are higher than man's ways. This is not a warning, it is a promise. Perfect self-expression also dissolves comparison. When a man is truly expressing himself, he has no interest in what others are doing. He is too occupied with his own unfoldment. Comparison ceases because it is no longer relevant. Each soul is playing a different part in the divine drama. I have often said that no one can take from you what belongs to you by divine right. If a position, a home, a relationship, or an opportunity is right for you, it is protected. If it passes out of your life, it was never truly yours. This understanding frees man from fear of loss and makes him generous in spirit. To establish this consciousness, repetition is necessary. One must impress the subconscious with the idea of order and right place. I give these affirmations often. I am in my right place, at the right time, under grace. I cannot miss my divine appointment. When spoken with faith, they dissolve anxiety and restore trust. As man lives in this understanding, he stops forcing doors. He waits for them to open. And when they do, he finds that they open easily. There is no struggle in divine design. What is right moves forward naturally. This brings man to a state of quiet confidence. He no longer fears being overlooked, for he knows that recognition follows alignment. He no longer envies another's success, for he understands that it cannot diminish his own. He stands secure, knowing that divine mind has planned his way and that no man can interfere with it. When this law is grasped, life ceases to feel accidental. Each experience, even the difficult ones, is seen as a guidepost. Man learns to ask, not, "Why is this happening?" but, "What is this leading me to?" And that question opens the next door. Thus, the spoken word, aligned with divine design, becomes a guiding force. Man not only speaks rightly, but listens rightly. And in that listening, he begins to follow the magic path of intuition, which never leads astray and always leads home. When man has learned to speak rightly and to recognize his divine design, he is prepared to follow the path by which that design is revealed. That path is intuition. I have often said that prayer is telephoning to God, and intuition is God telephoning to you. Yet many people pray without listening, and then wonder why they wander. They ask for guidance, but they insist upon reasoning it out. In doing so, they silence the very voice they seek. Intuition is not a mysterious gift reserved for the few. It is a spiritual faculty belonging to every soul. It is the voice of divine mind speaking through man's superconscious. It is always calm, always simple, and never argues. It does not shout. It does not reason. It states, and when it is obeyed, it leads unerringly to the place prepared. The reasoning mind is a useful servant, but a dangerous master. It deals only with appearances, with what has been, and with what seems probable. Intuition deals with what is true. Reason says, "It cannot be done." Intuition says, "Go forward." Reason counts the cost. Intuition knows the supply. When man places reason upon the throne, he remains in bondage. When he enthrones intuition, he enters freedom. I have known many people who stood at a fork in the road, unable to decide which way to turn. They weighed and measured until opportunity passed. Others, who followed a quiet inner lead, moved swiftly and were astonished at the ease with which things unfolded. The difference was not intelligence, but obedience. Intuition often leads man in ways that seem indirect. He goes for one thing and finds another, but what he finds is always better suited to his need. Divine mind knows the whole pattern, while man sees only a fragment. Therefore, intuition must be trusted even when it contradicts appearances. I remember a woman who needed money urgently. She had exhausted every known channel. While affirming quietly, she felt an impulse to walk her dog in an unusual direction. Her reason protested. There was no logic in it. Yet she followed the lead. In the middle of the block, she found a roll of bills which exactly met her need. She did not find the money by searching. She found it by listening. Many people miss their good because they insist upon understanding before obeying. But obedience must come first. Understanding follows. This is the law throughout the scriptures. The children of Israel were told to go forward before the Red Sea parted. The parting came after the step was taken. Intuition cannot operate in an atmosphere of resentment, fear, or hurry. These states blur vision. Anger clouds perception. Worry drowns the still, small voice. This is why non-resistance is essential. When man is fighting a situation, he cannot hear guidance. When he stands still inwardly, guidance rushes in. I often tell people to become very quiet, not merely outwardly, but inwardly, to cease rehearsing the problem, to stop arguing with themselves, to say, "I now stand still and see the salvation of the Lord." In that stillness, ideas flash. These ideas are intuitive leads. They come before reasoning begins. If one acts upon them promptly, they unfold perfectly. Intuition always speaks in the present tense. It does not say, someday. It says, now. Many people delay action, saying they will follow guidance later, but guidance is perishable. It must be acted upon when given. To delay is to doubt, and doubt dissolves the lead. When man follows intuition, others observe a marked change. He appears decisive without being forceful. He moves at the right moment. He seems protected. Doors open for him. Delays dissolve. This is not luck. It is alignment with divine order. I once knew a man who always consulted others before making decisions. He feared making mistakes. He gathered opinions until he was more confused than before. When he learned to ask for a definite, intuitive lead and to follow it without discussion, his affairs improved rapidly. He said, I no longer feel scattered. Intuition gathers power. It is important to distinguish between intuition and impulse. Impulse is emotional and urgent. Intuition is quiet and certain. Impulse says, act now or lose. Intuition says, this is the way. The feeling is entirely different. One excites, the other steadies. One may cultivate intuition by making this statement before sleep. In the morning, I shall know just what to do. This impresses the subconscious with expectancy. Answers often come upon waking or in the midst of ordinary activity. They do not come while one is anxiously demanding them. I have seen intuition save people from great loss. A woman once felt an unaccountable reluctance to sign a paper. Everything seemed favorable. Others urged her to proceed. She obeyed the inner check and delayed. Later, hidden facts came to light, which would have caused serious trouble. Intuition protected her where reason could not. Divine mind never leads man into danger, though it may lead him through appearances which seem uncertain. When the soul obeys, the way is made safe. This is why fear must be dismissed. Fear says, what if? Intuition says, follow. As man becomes accustomed to following intuition, life becomes simpler. Decisions take less time. Regret disappears. He no longer looks backward. He knows that each step is ordered. He begins to feel guided rather than driven. Others sense this guidance. They say, things always work out for you. They seek your advice. They trust your timing. You are no longer hurried by the world, because you are led by something higher. I often give this affirmation to those learning to trust intuition. I am divinely led, and I make right decisions. Another is, I follow the magic path of intuition, and my way is made easy. These statements quiet fear and restore confidence. The magic path is not dramatic. It is natural. It does not call attention to itself. It simply unfolds. When man stops forcing and starts listening, life answers quickly. Intuition also governs speech. It will often tell you when to speak and when to be silent. Many difficulties arise from speaking at the wrong moment. Intuition prevents this. It gives a check, a pause, a sense of restraint. When obeyed, misunderstandings are avoided. As this faculty develops, man ceases to envy those who seem fortunate. He understands that each is led according to his own design. He does not attempt to follow another's path. He follows his own. The magic path always leads to the promised land, though it may wind through unexpected territory. The important thing is obedience. Each step taken in faith strengthens the next. Confidence grows. Fear fades. When intuition is followed consistently, man finds himself in the right place at the right time. He meets the right people. He says the right words. He escapes what is not meant for him. This is not accident. It is law in action. Thus, intuition becomes the daily guide in the game of life. It takes the place of strain, argument, and anxiety. It restores simplicity, and simplicity is always the mark of divine movement. When man has learned to follow intuition, he is ready for the next great lesson, the art of non-resistance and the power of casting the burden. For even intuition cannot operate fully where the soul clings, resists, or strives. That lesson must now be learned. When man has learned to listen for guidance, he must also learn how to cease opposing the very good he seeks, for resistance is the great barrier. It is the wall man builds with his own thoughts, and then wonders why he cannot pass through it. Resistance may wear many disguises: resentment, fear, indignation, stubborn will, but in every form it is the same denial of divine order. The law is exact in this matter. What man resists, persists. Whatever he fights grows strong. Whatever he fears fastens itself upon him. The soul that is continually in opposition is like one rowing against the current. Exhaustion follows, and progress is slow. Yet when the oars are lifted, the current carries the boat forward with ease. Non-resistance is not weakness. It is strength under control. It does not mean submission to injustice, nor does it mean indifference. It means the refusal to give power to appearances. It means trusting the law to correct what man cannot. When one practices non-resistance, he withdraws his energy from the problem and places it in the solution. I have seen resentment ruin health, distort judgment, and block supply. Resentment is acid. It corrodes. It eats away the substance of the body and the peace of the mind. Many people do not realize how faithfully they rehearse old injuries. They tell themselves the same story again and again, until the picture is engraved upon the subconscious. Then life obligingly repeats it. I once knew a woman who was continually wronged, or so it seemed. Employers treated her unfairly. Friends disappointed her. Circumstances opposed her. She felt cursed by injustice. When we examined her consciousness, we found a deep-seated belief in being wronged. She expected injustice, and so she met it everywhere. When she learned to say, "My goodwill is a strong tower around me. I now change all enemies into friends," the pattern dissolved. She was amazed at the sudden kindness of people who had formerly opposed her. Forgiveness is the great dissolver. It is not something one does for another. It is something one does for oneself. When resentment is dropped, the knot loosens. The situation clears. Often, the outer condition changes without further effort. Sometimes, it disappears entirely. This is not sentiment. It is law. Jesus taught non-resistance when he said, "Resist not evil." He did not mean condone evil. He meant do not give it power. Evil feeds upon attention. When attention is withdrawn and truth is affirmed, evil withers. Darkness cannot stand before light. It simply vanishes. Many people say, "But I am right." Being right has never healed a situation. Being free has. The desire to prove oneself right keeps the conflict alive. When one releases the need to justify, the law acts. I have often seen situations resolve the moment someone stopped defending himself. Casting the burden is the supreme act of faith. It means acknowledging that the responsibility for outcome belongs to God, not to man. As long as man carries the burden, he interferes. When he releases it, the law operates unimpeded. Cast thy burden upon the Lord, and he shall sustain thee. This is not poetry. It is instruction. I give this affirmation frequently. I cast this burden on the Christ within, and I go free. When spoken with realization, It produces an immediate sense of relief. That relief is the sign that the burden has been transferred. If the relief does not come, the burden has not yet been cast. One must repeat the statement until peace is restored. I recall a man who was consumed with anxiety over a legal matter. He argued it endlessly in his mind. He rehearsed conversations. He imagined unfavorable outcomes. When he learned to cast the burden, truly and completely, the anxiety lifted. Shortly thereafter, the matter was settled favorably, with far less difficulty than he had anticipated. The law had been waiting for him to step aside. Resistance often appears as trying too hard. People say, "I must make this happen." That statement alone reveals mistrust. God does not require assistance. He requires cooperation. Cooperation means alignment, not pressure. The more man pushes, the more he blocks the flow. Non-resistance brings poise. The non-resistant person is not easily upset. He does not react. He responds. Others feel this steadiness and are influenced by it. They trust him. They defer to him. There is authority in calmness. I have noticed that when people stop fighting, life begins to fight for them. Situations rearrange themselves. Obstacles remove themselves. Enemies become allies or pass out of the picture. This is the working of divine law, not chance. Fear is another form of resistance. It resists good by expecting evil. Fear says, "Something will go wrong." Faith says, "All is well." The law obeys the dominant expectation. When fear is indulged, it becomes prophecy. When it is denied, it dissolves. One must be particularly vigilant against fear masquerading as caution. Many people say, "I am only being careful," when in truth, they are being fearful. True caution is guided by intuition. Fear is noisy and restless. Intuition is quiet and sure. Non-resistance also applies to time. Impatience resists divine timing. When man insists that something must happen now, he often delays it. Divine mind knows no delay, but man introduces it through hurry. I once knew a woman who was desperate to move. She disliked her surroundings and complained daily. Nothing changed. When she ceased complaining and began to affirm, "I am divinely placed," her attitude shifted. Within a short time, a perfect opportunity appeared. The change came when resistance ended. The body also responds to non-resistance. Tension creates congestion. Relaxation restores flow. Many ailments are the result of holding on, holding anger, holding fear, holding resentment. When these are released, the body heals naturally. This is not mysterious. It is orderly. I often remind people that God fights their battles when they cease fighting them. The long arm of God reaches over people and conditions, adjusting, protecting, and directing. Man need not manage outcomes. He need only manage his attitude. As one practices non-resistance, forgiveness becomes natural. Old grievances lose their charge. Memories fade. The past loosens its hold. This is freedom. And freedom is the natural state of the soul. Others will notice that you are no longer easily provoked. They may say, "You have changed." Indeed, you have. You have changed allegiance from fear to faith, from force to law. Your presence becomes healing. Your words carry weight. To establish this consciousness, repetition is essential. One must repeat truth until it replaces habit. These statements are powerful when used consistently. I am non-resistant to good. No weapon formed against me shall prosper. Divine order is now established in this situation. When man no longer resists, intuition flows freely. Guidance becomes clear. Decisions are easy. Life becomes less complicated. The unnecessary falls away. The essential remains. Thus, non-resistance prepares the way for abundance. For supply cannot flow through clenched hands. It requires openness. It requires trust. When man has learned to release, he is ready to receive. And so, having cast the burden and ceased resistance, man stands at the threshold of the next great realization, the understanding of supply, preparation, and the magic purse of the spirit, which can never be depleted. When man has learned to cease resisting and has truly cast the burden, he is prepared to understand supply. For supply does not come through tension or hoarding, but through confidence in the law. Many people believe that abundance is a matter of accumulation, of careful guarding, of anxious saving. In truth, abundance is a state of consciousness, and money is but its symbol. Where consciousness is impoverished, no amount of money can bring peace. Where consciousness is rich, supply flows easily. True preparation is faith in action. It is the act which follows belief, not the act which attempts to create it. One may say, "I believe," yet if his actions contradict his words, belief has not yet taken root. Preparation is the outward sign of inward agreement. It says to the subconscious, "I expect this good to arrive." I have often told the story of a man who desired to go abroad. He had little money and no visible means, yet he understood the law of preparation. He bought a trunk. It was a bold act, but it was not reckless. It was inspired. That trunk became a symbol to his subconscious. Each time he saw it, he felt the reality of the journey. Soon after, unexpected funds came, and the trip was made under grace, in perfect ways. Preparation does not mean foolish expenditure. It means alignment. One may prepare in thought, in attitude, in arrangement. A woman who desires a home may begin to collect small things for it, or she may simply make room in her mind by ceasing to say, "I shall never have one." Preparation may be silent, but it must be sincere. Many people block their good by preparing for what they fear. They say, "I must save in case of illness," or "I must be careful, for something may go wrong." In doing so, they prepare the very thing they dread. The law of preparation works impartially. It brings what is expected, whether good or ill. Therefore, one must be vigilant. Expectation is the substance of things hoped for. When expectation is fixed upon good, good appears. When expectation is divided, results are uncertain. I have known people who affirmed abundance while secretly bracing themselves for lack. They were like a house divided against itself. The law could not act decisively. I once knew a woman who feared to pay her bills. She watched her account anxiously, believing that as money went out, nothing would replace it. She was given the affirmation, "My supply comes from God. I have the magic purse of the Spirit." As she repeated it with conviction, fear dissolved. She paid her bills with gratitude. Shortly thereafter, money came through unexpected channels. The purse had proven itself magic. The magic purse is not a fairy tale. It is a symbol of consciousness. It represents the understanding that supply is inexhaustible because its source is inexhaustible. God is the giver and the gift. When man looks to the channel, he fears depletion. When he looks to the source, he rests. Hoarding is a confession of unbelief. Generosity is a confession of faith. This does not mean reckless giving, but free circulation. Water which stagnates becomes foul. Money which is feared stagnates. Money which circulates returns. This is law. Preparation must always be joyful. Anxious preparation contradicts itself. If one prepares nervously, he impresses the subconscious with fear, not faith. Joy is the seal of right preparation. When the heart is light, the act is right. Others notice this change in consciousness. The person who trusts supply appears prosperous even before money appears. He moves without hurry. He gives without fear. He receives without embarrassment. People are drawn to him. Opportunities find him. He is in the current. I often give this statement. I call on the law of accumulation. My supply pours in and piles up under grace. It does not suggest lack or saving. It suggests flow. The subconscious responds to the picture. One must never dictate channels. God creates his own amazing avenues. When man says, "It must come this way," he limits the law. When he says, "It comes in unexpected ways," he opens infinite possibilities. Many miracles have been lost through insistence. I recall a woman who wanted a certain sum of money from a particular person. She waited and worried. When she released the channel and affirmed supply, the money came from an entirely different source. Had she remained fixed on her plan, she would have missed it. Supply often appears suddenly, but it is never accidental. It is the result of inner alignment. When man has prepared, expected, and ceased resistance, the manifestation is inevitable. Preparation also involves gratitude. Gratitude acknowledges receipt before appearance. It is a powerful act of faith. When one gives thanks for what seems unseen, he affirms reality beyond appearances. The law responds instantly. Many people say, "I shall be grateful when it comes." That is backward. Gratitude precedes reception. It is the open door. I have seen situations change overnight when gratitude replaced complaint. As man lives in expectancy, he ceases to worry about timing. He knows that divine mind is never late. Delay often indicates inner conflict. When conflict is resolved, movement is swift. This understanding transforms one's manner. Others see confidence, not arrogance, calm, not indifference. They sense that you expect good, and expectation is contagious. People begin to treat you accordingly. Supply also follows right service. When man gives the best of himself, he opens the way for the best to come to him. But service must be free, not bargaining. One must not say, "I will do this so that I may receive that." That is barter, not faith. When man understands the magic purse, fear of loss disappears. He knows that whatever goes out returns multiplied. He is no longer anxious about spending, nor reckless. He is balanced. Repetition establishes this consciousness. One must repeat truth until fear has no voice. These affirmations are powerful when spoken daily. My supply comes from God. As money goes out, it returns multiplied. I am always provided for. When this law is grasped, life becomes generous. Man stops measuring and begins to trust. He lives under grace, not under calculation. Thus, preparation and expectancy bring man to the threshold of the promised land. He is no longer struggling for supply. He is allowing it. And this prepares him for the final realization, the life lived wholly under grace, in perfect ways. When man has learned to speak rightly, to listen for guidance, to cease resisting, and to trust the unfailing supply of divine mind, he enters what the scriptures call the promised land. This is not a place upon the map, but a state of consciousness. It is the state in which fear no longer governs, effort no longer exhausts, and good is no longer uncertain. Here, life flows. Many people imagine that the promised land lies somewhere ahead, to be reached after long struggle or heroic effort, but it is entered the moment man aligns himself with divine law. It is always nearer than he thinks. The wilderness is not a distance to be crossed, but a belief to be dropped. When the belief falls away, the land appears beneath his feet. The Bible tells us that the walls of Jericho fell when the people shouted. They did not batter the walls. They did not scale them. They spoke the word of realization, and the walls collapsed. Every man has his own Jericho walls of lack, delay, fear, resentment, or self-doubt. These walls are not real in substance, and belief yields only to realization. I have given this statement to many whose way seemed blocked. The walls of lack and delay now crumble away, and I enter my promised land under grace. When spoken with conviction, it brings a vivid inner picture. One sees oneself stepping over fallen stones, not climbing them. This is the correct image. One does not conquer good, one enters it. Living under grace means that life ceases to feel forced. Things come together naturally. Right people appear. Right words are spoken at the right moment. Man finds himself saying, "How easily that happened," forgetting how impossible it once seemed. Grace is the absence of strain. Under grace, man no longer fears loss. He understands that divine mind knows no subtraction. What is taken was never truly his. What is his cannot be taken. This releases a great burden. One stops clinging. One stops guarding. One stops defending. Life becomes simple. I have noticed that people living under grace carry themselves differently. Their movements are unhurried. Their voices are calm. They are not easily startled by events. Others feel at ease with them. Employers trust them. Friends confide in them. Children sense safety. Authority without harshness radiates from them. This change comes from inner order. When the inner house is set in order, the outer follows. Man no longer vacillates between hope and fear. He expects good as a matter of course. Expectation becomes his habit. The watchman at the gate must still remain alert. Living under grace does not mean carelessness of thought. It means mastery. One does not allow old fears to creep back and reoccupy the house. When a negative suggestion arises, it is met calmly with truth. That is not my belief, and it passes. I have often said that the game of life is a game of solitaire. No one plays against you. You play against your own thoughts. When those thoughts are aligned with divine law, the game becomes harmonious. There is no competition, no envy, no rivalry, only unfolding. People often say, "But life is uncertain." Life is only uncertain to the uncertain mind. To the mind established in truth, life is orderly. Appearances may change, but law does not. The soul that understands this walks steadily, even when the ground seems to shift. Under grace, man ceases to rehearse the past. He knows that forgiveness has wiped the slate clean. He does not carry old mistakes forward as evidence against himself. He understands that error destroys itself when truth is accepted. This brings great freedom. The promised land is also the land of right relationships. Under grace, man no longer attracts struggle in companionship. He attracts harmony because he is harmonious. He no longer fears abandonment because he is anchored. He no longer clings because he trusts. I have seen people transformed when they ceased to say, "Why does this always happen to me?" and began to say, "I am under grace." The pattern broke. The repetition stopped. New experiences appeared. Grace had replaced struggle. Repetition remains essential. Even here, not repetition born of fear, but repetition born of joy. One repeats truth because it feels good, because it restores balance. These statements establish permanence. I am under grace and not under strain. Divine order governs my life. There is no loss in divine mind. When these ideas are impressed upon the subconscious, they become automatic. Man no longer has to remind himself. His reactions change. His expectations change. His life reflects it. Living under grace also brings humility. One recognizes that good is not personal achievement, but divine operation. Pride dissolves. Gratitude takes its place. Gratitude is the climate of the promised land. Under grace, timing ceases to alarm. If something has not appeared, one knows it is preparing. There is no panic, no rushing. The soul rests. Others may ask how you remain so calm. You may not be able to explain it fully. You simply know. Explanation is not required. Demonstration is enough. The greatest sign that one has entered the promised land is this: peace is no longer dependent on conditions. Peace remains, even while conditions change. This is mastery. The game of life is then no longer something to be won. It is something to be played wisely. Each day becomes an opportunity to express trust, order, and joy. Each experience confirms the law. I have seen people who once lived in fear become pillars of strength to others, not through preaching, but through example. Their very presence instructs. This is the highest form of teaching. When man lives under grace, he ceases to ask, "Will it work?" He knows that law always works. He concerns himself only with alignment. The rest takes care of itself. Thus, the secret to manifestation is revealed not as a method, but as a way of being. It is the way of faith instead of fear, consent instead of struggle, listening instead of forcing, gratitude instead of anxiety. The promised land is entered quietly. There is no trumpet blast. There is simply the deep knowing that all is well. And from that knowing, all good flows, under grace, in perfect ways.